Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, picture this. You're in charge of a massive infrastructure project, not just any project. We're talking a huge new power plant, maybe a high-tech factory. And here's the twist. You don't get the blueprints.
Hmm.
You have to design the whole thing, build it, and then hand over the keys. So when the stakes are that high, and one tiny mistake in a calculation could lead to failure, who's actually responsible for the design?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? And it takes us right into the FIDIC 2017 Conditions of Contract for Plant and Design Build, or, as most people in the industry know it, the Yellow Book.
Right, the Yellow Book. Our sources today really give us a blow-by-blow of how this contract works, how it shifts liability. So our mission here is to get our heads around the controls, the deadlines, the documents, the very real financial penalties that manage all the risk in these massive projects.
Exactly. We need to understand how the paperwork really becomes the law on site.
And I guess we have to start with the big picture.
Yeah, the context is everything. The Yellow Book basically works on one premise. The employer says what they want, the performance requirements, but it's the contractor who has to figure out how to build it. And that means everything, I mean everything, hangs on the contractor's design documents. Managing that flow of paper is the central control mechanism for the entire project.
Okay, so let's dig into that. The core responsibility. I mean, the contract is pretty black and white on this, isn't it?
Yeah.
It says the contractor is 100% responsible for the design of the works. That's the starting point.
That's the line in the sand. And from there, you get this really high bar for the design team. It's like a triple lock on who can even do the work. First, your designers have to be, qualified, experienced, competent professionals.
Standard stuff.
Standard stuff. Second, they have to meet any specific criteria the employer laid out in the employer's requirements, the ER.
And the third one is the big one for international projects, I imagine.
It is. They have to be legally qualified and entitled under local laws to design the works in that specific country. So you can't just fly in your team from home. They have to be compliant where the work is happening.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting because it goes beyond just being qualified. There's this availability clause.
Yes. This is where you see the long-term liability baked in. The contractor doesn't just promise their designers are good now. They have to undertake contractually that those designers will remain available for discussions with the engineer or employer at any reasonable time.
Available for how long? I mean, once the place is built, don't they just move on to the next job?
That's what you'd think, but that's the surprising detail. They have to be available right up until the final performance certificate is issued.
The performance certificate, that's not the same as the handover, is it?
Not at all.
No.
The taking over certificate is when the plant is basically built and running. The performance certificate comes after the defects notification period, which could be, 1-2 years after the facility is already in operation.
Wow. So you could be 3, maybe 4 years after construction, and a problem emerges, a hidden flaw in a calculation that only shows up with use, and the person who did that original design is contractually on the hook to come back and talk about it.
Exactly. It's an incredible risk mitigation tool. It guarantees that the person who owns the intellectual property of that design is still accountable long after they've left the site. It's all reinforced by this general undertaking that the design, the documents, everything will comply with the law and the contract. It's airtight.
So we've established the contractor is the designer, and they need top talent on a long leash. Let's get into the process itself, the document flow. The clock starts ticking with the notice to commence. What's the very first job?
Well, it's not actually starting the design. The very first thing is what's called the scrutiny requirement. The contractor has to go through the employer's requirements, all the data the employer gave them, and hunt for any errors, faults, or defects.
That seems huge. I mean,
Yeah.
the ER for a power plant must be thousands of pages. What if they miss something in the employer's data?
That is the tightrope. If they find an error, there are procedures. But if they miss an error that they reasonably should have found, and then they build their design on that faulty foundation, well, they could end up carrying the can for it. It's all about due diligence.
So it puts massive pressure on that initial review. Okay, so what exactly are these contractors' documents? What's in this library they have to create?
It really is a library. You can basically break it down into 3 big categories. First, all the drawings, calculations, specifications, the blueprints that are actually listed in the employer's requirements.
Okay, and the second category is less technical, more bureaucratic.
You could say that, but if you fail here, the project just stops. This is all the paperwork needed for regulatory approvals. Permits, licenses, environmental impact statements, everything you need to be compliant with local laws.
And the third category is what the employer needs to actually run the thing after the contractor leaves.
Correct. We're talking about the as-built record showing exactly where every pipe and cable is, and the big one, the operation and maintenance manuals. These are absolutely critical deliverables.
And the employer's team can watch all of this being created.
They have the right to inspect the preparation of these documents, not just the final product. So they can be in the design office, looking over shoulders, checking the modeling. It's about catching problems early before they become a 500-page mistake.
Which brings us neatly to the real core of this, the critical review mechanism. This is where the deadlines have real teeth.
This is where it all comes down to the 21-day clock. So the contractor gets a document ready, let's say the foundation drawings. They submit it to the engineer, but, and this is key, they have to submit it with a formal contractor's notice.
And that notice is a legal statement, right? Is the contractor saying this is ready, it's fit for use, and it complies with the contract. They're putting their neck on the line.
They absolutely are. And the moment the engineer gets that notice, the clock starts. It's a review period of typically not exceeding 21 days. And in that time, the engineer has to do one of two things.
Option A is good news.
Option A is a notice of no objection. Thumbs up, you can build, maybe with a few minor comments. Option B is the bad news. A notice of failure, which has to explain exactly what's wrong and why.
Okay, but what if the engineer just sits on it, gets busy?
And that is the financial hammer. The thing everyone needs to remember, it's the deemed approval. If the engineer gives no notice within those 21 days, nothing at all, they are legally deemed to have given a notice of no objection.
So silence means yes. That's a huge shift. It stops the engineer from just stalling the project indefinitely.
It does, but with a small catch. It only works if any underlying documents it relies on have already been approved. So you can't just game the system.
Right. But let's go to the nightmare scenario. The document fails. Notice B. The contractor has to revise it. What happens then, financially?
The contract is just brutal on this point. It's designed to make you get it right the first time. If you have to revise, you are not entitled to an extension of time. Any delay caused by that rework, that's your problem.
So if your design team makes a mistake and fixing it takes 3 weeks, you can't ask for those 3 weeks back on the project deadline.
Not a chance. You eat that time. And to make it worse, the employer can recover any extra costs they incurred because of your failure. Specifically, the engineer's time to review your documents a second time.
That is a double whammy. You lose time and you have to pay the reviewer for the extra work your mistake created.
It completely shifts the financial risk of poor quality design onto the contractor.
And this paper trail has a direct physical consequence, right? The stop work provision.
Yes. You cannot start building a part of the works until its design document has that notice of no objection or is deemed to have it. And you have to build exactly according to that document.
What if you change something on the fly?
If the contractor modifies an approved design mid-construction, even a small change, and the engineer spots it, all work on that part has to stop immediately.
And it's treated like a failure.
Exactly. It's as if a notice of failure was just issued. You can't restart until you've submitted the revised drawings and they've gone through the whole 21-day review process all over again. The physical work is totally hostage to the paperwork.
Okay, let's move toward the end game. Compliance and final handover. What about when technical standards change mid-project?
Right. This is a tricky one. Usually the contract is based on the standards in place on the base date when it was signed, but the completed project has to comply with the laws and standards in force when it's taken over.
So say a new, tougher environmental law comes out a year before completion.
The contractor has to meet that new standard. They have to propose the changes needed, maybe a new filtration system or something. And if the engineer agrees it's a genuine change in law, it can become a variation, which might mean more time and money.
So it protects the employer from getting a new plant that's already out of date or illegal.
Precisely. It ensures fitness for purpose.
And then there's the final documentation we mentioned earlier, the as-built and the O&M manuals.
Absolutely non-negotiable. The as-built records have to show where everything actually is. They're vital for the employer to run the facility safely. They have to be submitted before testing even starts.
And the O&M manuals have to be really, really detailed, enough for the employer to operate, maintain, even dismantle and reassemble the plant.
They're the instruction book for a billion-dollar machine. Provisional versions are needed before testing, final versions before handover. And they all go through that same 21-day review.
Which brings us to the final trap. The ultimate test of liability. Clause 5.8. What happens if a big design error is found 6 months after handover, even though the engineer gave a notice of no objection to that drawing?
This is the moment of truth for any design-build contract. The engineer's no objection is not an acceptance of liability. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. If an error is found in the contractor's design at any time, the contractor has to fix it.
So the sign-off is just permission to build, not a guarantee that the design is perfect.
It's a gateway, not an insurance policy. And the money clause here is the showstopper. All corrections and resubmissions under this clause are entirely at the contractor's risk and cost. The design liability is absolute. It never goes away.
So what does this all really tell us when we boil it all down?
I mean, it tells us that the FIDIC framework puts the contractor on a relentless 21-day timer for every piece of the design. The whole system is built to punish mistakes and delays with severe financial consequences. The engineer is a gatekeeper, for sure, but the fundamental responsibility for quality that never, ever leaves the contractor.
The pressure is just immense to get that paper trail perfect. Which leads me to our final thought. Given how much is riding on that 21-day review period.
It's incredibly high leverage.
So the question for you to think about is this. Does that 21-day deemed approval put more pressure on the engineer to rush their review, to maybe let small things slide so they don't accept a design by default? Or does the pure financial terror of getting a notice of failure put so much pressure on the contractor that they have to aim for absolute perfection on the first try? It really changes the whole dynamic on site, doesn't it?